Hey everybody, welcome to my kitchen. Today we're gonna learn all about how to do a hot water bath for canning. I'm going to can something super simple, tomatoes. They've been picked fresh from my garden and they taste so much better in the winter than store-bought canned tomatoes do. So if you've ever wondered how to do a hot water bath or you're interested in learning what my recipe is for canned tomatoes, keep watching. Hey, my name is Jen. I am so glad that you are here. As you might have noticed, this is a Canadian channel. We're all about living on less and how to do that. And I can't think of a better way to save money than home preserving and home canning. A lot of people are intimidated by canning. There's so many different ways you can preserve. You can freeze things. You can can without a hot water bath, with a hot water bath. You can use a pressure canner. There's so many different ways. Today I'm just gonna do a traditional hot water bath because I feel it's one of the easiest ways to preserve and can in a way that's going to guarantee you a really good seal, and you don't need a ton of extra special equipment to do it. So first, let me give you a little tour of my kitchen to show you the equipment that we're going to be using that you'll wanna have on hand if you're going to do this as well. So you'll see here, I just have a really big stock pot. That's one thing about canning. You don't necessarily have to have a canning pot. What I was noticing over the years is that a lot of the canning pots are made to fit like a little pint or half pint jar, jam jars, relish jars, and they weren't tall enough to give headspace for my tall quart jars, for my 2-gallon jars, that type of thing. So I went out and I just bought like a big stock pot that you would make a whole ton of stew or spaghetti sauce in, and that's what I use as my canning pot. You also want some sort of rack that's going to hold your jars steady in place and keep them kind of off the very bottom of the pot while you're doing your hot water bath. So what else do I have over here? I have another pot that's got some lids in it. So you can see right here, these are my snap lids with screw rings. So you want to make sure you buy new snap lids every time you can something. Let me just show you here. The snap lid is this part, this round part. The ring is this part. You can reuse your rings again and again and again when you're canning, but if you want to make sure you have a guaranteed seal, always use a new snap lid. And the reason I have them in a pot is because they need to be in hot water, getting hot, not boiling water, but they need to be in hot water, being sterilized and bringing the temperature up before we put them on our jars. Now I'm gonna show you inside my oven because there's something important in there too. So as you can see, inside my oven, I have quart jars that I've just placed in there. I've washed them so they're nice and clean, and I put a couple inches of water in them. Don't look too closely at my dirty oven, you guys. It needs to be cleaned. Anyway, I put them in the oven because this is the best way to get them warmed. Some people warm them like in their canning pot or in their dishwasher or whatever, but I've just found this is the simplest method. You just put a couple inches of water in your clean jars and you put your oven on about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That keeps them warm the whole time. And in my oven, I mean, I can fit about 14 or 15 jars in here at a time. So it's just a really great way to do this in bulk. Okay, what about size of jars? This can get really confusing. You might hear 1 liter jar, quart jar, 4-cup jar. You really don't know what they are. It's because for us Canadians especially, we don't always work with the measurement systems that other countries do, so recipes can be confusing. Make sure you know what size of jar you need or are using because that's really important when it comes to how long those jars are going to be in that hot water bath. That would come in handy are a funnel to fill your jars. This is a special one that has the right size of mouth for a standard mason jar. I have this nifty little magnet that I love to use that picks up my lids and rings from their own little hot water pot to put on. So much easier than using tongs. You want a non-metallic tool of some sort, and I will explain why you need this later. And this is like, I just call it like a jar grabber. I don't know. It's a special tong, but you can see that it's round, so it fits especially around the top of a mason jar. This is a really good thing to have. If you want some of these materials for canning and you don't have them, have no fear, I've linked them below. I have Amazon affiliates for all of them, so you are more than welcome to use my links to purchase those items for yourself. Oh, a ladle is also a good idea, and plenty of washcloths and towels. Okay, let's get started on these tomatoes. This morning I went outside with my kids and we picked a whole bunch of ripe tomatoes from our garden. If you've seen my previous gardening videos, you will be able to see how far along our garden is now compared to when we planted it. We have an abundance of produce. It's been a great year for the garden. We've gotten a good amount of heat and rain, and as you can see, when a tomato plant gets to the point where all the tomatoes are ripening at once, the stalks and the leaves tend to start to die off. Especially here in Canada, we have sometimes blights that go around the end of fall that kind of start to kill off the tomato plants a bit. But so you can see here, they don't necessarily look pretty. They're starting to get gangly and falling over, but we have so many tomatoes. For this canned tomato recipe, I'm using all types of tomatoes. It does not matter to me whether I'm using a Roma or a beefsteak or a Bonnie Best or cherry tomatoes. You can use whatever type of tomato you have on hand. So I'm going to wash up those tomatoes so they're nice and clean, and then we are going to start our first step. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your tomatoes and you are going to blanch them in boiling hot water and then put them in cold water to slip the skins. This is such an easy way to get rid of the skins and stems on your tomatoes. Do not peel all your tomatoes. Make sure you're blanching so you can slip the skins. So we're gonna do that right now. Once you've popped your tomatoes in, it's only gonna take a minute or two for them to be blanched enough for the skin to come off. What you're going to notice is that the skin is starting to peel away. You'll see that in the water. That's when you know it's time to take them out and put them in your sink of really cold water. I'm gonna keep going on all these tomatoes and blanching them up, and I will meet you on the other side. All right, here's my sink chock full of tomatoes. You can totally see the skins coming away here. So what I'm going to do is simply take all of my tomatoes, and I'll show you how I do it to just slip the skins right off and the stems. It's super easy peasy, and then I kind of chop them at the same time. So let's do that. So something I find really helpful is to kind of set up like an assembly line off of my sink. So here I have my bowl for scrap, I have my bowl to catch my tomatoes, and I like to put it all out on a towel. Even when your counter is totally safe to be doing this type of stuff on, it just saves you from having drips everywhere. So you simply take your tomato, and you can see here, maybe I'll bring it up close. You can see here the skin. Just use your fingers to get the skin off and pop it into the scrap bowl. And what I did there, and when I just did it with my fingers, the stem came right off with it. But if it doesn't come all the way off, or see you have like a little bit left, you can just use a paring knife to get that off. I love Henkel's paring knives, so that's what I like to use. And maybe you want to can your tomatoes whole. I like to chop them up a bit, so I'm simply just going to chop them up right there into my bowl. And I will continue with my entire sink full of tomatoes and do them all at once here. Okay, I'm gonna take a little break from chopping here, and I want you to comment and tell me what your favorite thing is to make with canned tomatoes. I'm gonna be using the ones that I'm doing up today for the winter. I'll be using them in like chili, in pasta sauce, in soups and stews. There are so many different things I like to use to make with them, but I'm always looking for more ideas. So what do you like to make with canned tomatoes? Let us all know below. All right, back to chopping. Done. All right, my tomatoes are ready to go. Now comes the fun part, filling our jars. So what you want to do first is remove your jars from the oven, dump out that excess water, and get your jars set up ready to fill. So this is called the raw pack method for tomatoes, okay? So we're not gonna cook the tomatoes, we're gonna put them in the jars raw. So simply ladle your tomatoes into the jars until you're within about 1 inch of the headspace of the jar. Then each jar you're going to top with 1 teaspoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. You need this in the recipe, you guys. You can't go without this. This is what's going to help keep your tomatoes stay preserved. It's going to prevent botulism, so make sure you have those 2 items. If you don't want to use sugar, you could also use lemon juice, but you need more lemon juice. You're going to need about 2 to 3 tablespoons of lemon juice per jar. So I do 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt on the top of each quart jar. Next, take that nifty non-metallic tool and pop it in all 4 corners of each jar to get out any air bubbles. Then you take a wet washcloth and wipe down the rims to make sure it's nice and clean. If you have any sort of debris on the rims of those jars, it's going to prevent a seal. So it's really important to do this. Now take your hot snap lids and rings and put them squarely center on each jar and fasten those rings nice and tight. I forgot to mention, in the meantime, you should be heating up that huge pot of water for your hot water bath. You want to make sure there's enough water in that pot to cover an inch or 2 above every jar that's inside. A great way to measure this, just to be sure, is to take whatever jar you're using, kind of set it beside your pot like this and eyeball wherever you have your water. If you've filled up your water line to an inch or 2 above your jar, you know you're gonna be safe because it's gonna displace even more water than that. The trick with your hot water bath is you don't want that pot of water to be at a super rapid boil. That's going to be too hot. It's going to cause what's in your jar maybe to boil a little too much and overflow and prevent a seal. You just want it on a really gentle boil, just bubbling a bit. That is the sweet spot for canning temperature. So next you're going to take all of your jars, place them in the rack, and lower it into the water. And then pop a lid on that hot water bath pot. With tomatoes, you need to process them in this pot a lot longer than most things, just because of the acidity level of tomatoes. It's going to be much longer. So today, mine are going to be in that canner for a minimum of 40 minutes. This is going to allow that internal temperature to reach a certain amount, and it's going to ensure that my tomatoes are preserved well. If you're doing jams or relishes, different things like that that have a lot of sugar in them and a much different acidity level, then those usually only take about 10 minutes in a hot water bath. But for these tomatoes, it's going to take you 40. Once you've set your timer and 40 minutes has gone off, go ahead and remove the jars from the hot water using that nifty grabber tool. I also like to use oven mitts that are silicone oven mitts. Those are my favorite kind, just because if they get wet, it's okay, and that pot and those jars are hot. Stick those jars in a corner of your kitchen where they're not going to be disturbed until you hear them pop. That pop means your jars have sealed. Yay, you did it! Once they've sealed, however, don't touch them. Leave them there for 24 hours. And once that 24 hours is up, I go ahead and remove all of the rings from the jars and give them a good wash. Why do you want to do this? Well, I made the mistake of not doing this the first couple years we started canning, and what I found was there was often food debris or syrup or different things like that on the outside of the jars, which got moldy and gross in our fruit cellar. So you want to give them a good wash, and then you can wash the rings and reuse them on future things you're going to can. So you don't have to have that ring on it all winter long. Place your jars in a cool, dark place. This is our fruit cellar. You can see that we have canned quite a bit already this summer, and there is a lot more to come this fall once apples and squash come into season. But if you don't have a fruit cellar, that's okay. Find just a dark corner of your basement. If you don't have a basement, a dark closet in your apartment or condo that has some shelving in it that you can store things. Alright, so how did you like doing hot water bath canning with me? Do you have any questions that I didn't cover here? Feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I'm going to link you guys coming up to some more of my canning videos just in case you're interested in non-water bath canning or some of the recipes I use for other things I like to can. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video. For the least, this is Jen.